Hello, everybody. What an honor to be with you tonight. It really is my pleasure to be in a community that doesn't just talk about, we care about the whole child, but you actually invest your time, your energy, your money, your passions in children's social and emotional learning in your schools. I spent some time before I came today looking at the websites of all the partner supporters, and I looked at your mission statements. And I was looking for how social and emotional learning was integrated into your core mission. It was in every single one I saw. Yes. That's incredible. It makes me want to move here because that's not true in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm working on it. So thank you, Lonnie. Thank you, Tom, for bringing me here. And I also feel very at home here because Roger Weisberg is a longtime mentor and dear friend of mine. He is a leading scientist in the field of social and emotional learning. He has been called the grandfather of social and emotional learning, and he also lives in this community and was part of some of the beginning stages of supporting social and emotional learning in many of your schools. He could not be here tonight, but I send him love across the miles. So again, thank you for having me this evening. I want to start, as in any good planning process, with the end in mind. And we're going to use as a proxy for the end high school graduation, because it represents perhaps the last time our children will be in our house day to day. So I want you to go in your mind's eye to one of your child's high school graduations. If you have multiples, maybe it's the child you choose who you worry most about, or maybe it's the child who you never worry about and needs more attention. So pick a child. It's their high school graduation. You're hosting a party. You are so proud. All your friends and family are there. And your child's favorite teacher raises her glass and she says, I have to make a toast. I have to tell you about this student. She is what? I want you to think about fill in the blank, or he is what? How would you fill in that blank? What are your hopes for your child? We asked, in fact, I worked with Roger Weisberg and also Shannon Wanless at the University of Pittsburgh, who is an applied developmental psychologist. We asked 100 social and emotional learning experts about their personal parenting. That wasn't a joke, but that's good. So, yeah, so we asked a similar question. What are your hopes for your children? And we didn't give them words. We let them tell us what their hopes were. And they said things like, I want my child to be happy. I want them to be confident. I want them to be empathetic and loving. Did any of these words come to mind for you? Yes. Okay. And then we said, what are your hopes for your own role as a parent? And they were very similar. They said, I want to be patient. I want to be happy. I want to be loving. I want to have high expectations. I want to be honest. I want to be kind. So Roger and Shannon and I thought, well, if some of these hopes line up with social and emotional competencies that we study, we know are critical for children to learn in school in order to be successful in life, wouldn't that be a great way to help parents understand how they could influence their development at home? What we learned when we mapped on those hopes for our children and for our parenting was that there was a direct relationship with all of them. Now, there was no one who said they wanted their child to be a prom queen. There was no one who said they hoped that their student would be in AP Calculus. But they had these kind of grand visions, which it sounds like some of you had in your head as far as your big hopes for your children. So the social emotional skills that you probably are very familiar with because they are being taught through curriculum in your schools and integrated into the curriculum are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. This offers great hope to parents. Why? Because we have a million opportunities through our everyday routines, even through our thorniest parenting challenges, to influence our hopes and dreams, our long-term hopes and dreams, by focusing on promoting competencies, social and emotional competencies. I want to tell you how I got into this work. So I worked with schools in social and emotional learning for many, many years. I worked at Castle. I worked with Roger Weisberg, and I loved my work. And then I became a parent 12 years ago. And I found, as I was on the road traveling, working with schools, that I really wanted to be doing this thing, social and emotional learning, in my parenting. So I went looking for resources. Parenting with social and emotional learning seemed obvious to me since I had been in the field. I couldn't find anything. And so I had a 3 a.m. kind of brainstorm. Oh my goodness, if I can't find it, I should do it because it'll help me and maybe it'll help others in the process. So literally every week I started a blog called Confident Parents, Confident Kids, and every week I would write about one small practice tied to research that would promote a social and emotional skill. So my curiosity began with a whack. My toddler, probably not quite 2, he was in his room playing away, very focused. I came in and said, Ethan, we're gonna have to go to the next activity. Pick your last thing, and then we're gonna go. And he stood up, he didn't say anything. He got red in the face, marched over to me whacked me on the leg. And I mean, he was, chubby cheeks, little guy. I probably barely felt it. But my reaction to that whack was shocking. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run away. I felt punished. Like an adult, like my mom was punishing me, and here this was this little 2-year-old, angry. And the other astonishing thing to me was that I study child development, and I know toddlers hit. They bite out of frustration. When they're angry, they lash out because they don't have the words to communicate, right? Have you experienced this? Yes, right. So I knew this with my cognitive brain, but my emotions said otherwise. I got very upset. Then when thought flooded my brain, I thought, oh, what if he's going to be a violent person someday? How could I raise a violent person, right? And then I did the self-flagellation, which we get really good at. That's ridiculous. What are you doing? Of course he's not going to be a violent person. Why are you reacting so extremely? So that one whack, that one moment made me stand back and think, this is why they say parenting is so hard. This is it, right? It's this mashup of feeling upon thought, upon feeling, upon, oh my gosh, their future, that makes parenting so very challenging. The fact that we are so deeply invested in our children's success makes parenting so challenging. So I got really curious about how we do this in the messy context of family life, not with a neat little curriculum, but in the everyday mess and the raw nature of family life. So when I announced that I was writing a parenting book, people started treating me like a priest. It was very strange. People would walk up, like kind of look down, not make eye contact, and their guilt was palpable, and say, I am not a perfect parent. So I wanted to put this at the beginning of the presentation, that this has nothing to do with perfect parenting. In fact, it is the opposite. This is about learning. The fact that our children are developing and learning, and we're learning about their development, which requires mistakes, failures, missteps, and a lot of grace and forgiveness along the way. It also means that we as adults are developing. It's not just our kids. And that every parenting challenge, every one of them, is an opportunity for us to develop, for us to hone our own social and emotional skills. Everyone is an opportunity. I'm going to talk about 3 major themes tonight. I'm going to talk about temperament, or our emotional reflexes, our defaults that we're born with. I'm going to talk about ages and stages, so how emotional development looks from baby years through teen years. And then third, I'm going to talk about our own big feelings as parents. When I surveyed a mom's club in Central Ohio, I surveyed 50 moms. I said, one book would you pick off the shelf? They said, give me something on big feelings. And that's exactly what I set out to do, because that is what is tough about parenting, whether it's our big feelings, our children's big feelings, or the interaction. It's usually the difficulty is the interaction between the two. I heard that Mark Brackett was here, talked about emotions, gave you a whole 101, 102 on emotions, and dispelled some of our cultural myths on emotions. So you are now emotion experts, I'm assuming. I would like to define emotions because we talk about it so much. Tonight, emotions are simply vital information from our core about what's happening inside of us and outside of us based on our past experiences. And it could be anywhere in our past. It could be from our childhood, it could be from our 20s, it could be from yesterday. The mystery of emotions. And so emotions are always subject to interpretation. They're one way, one piece of information of making meaning in the world. Now, if the vocal cords are the instrument of the body, then the emotions are the instruments of the heart, the mind, and the spirit. And like a piano or a trumpet that sits on our bookshelf and looks pretty, we can just leave it there. We don't have to learn about it. But if we train ourselves and our children on their emotions, then they have a new vehicle for self-expression. And that vehicle can be a powerful asset in our lives and in their lives, and help them become successful, resilient, contributing adults. You'll notice I use illustrations and music in my writing, in my speaking, because talking about children's social and emotional learning can become very heady, an academic endeavor. But when we talk about parenting, we speak from the heart. And so the arts really are a window into our hearts and kind of open up the discussion for feeling in a way that I think no other source can. So let's talk about temperaments, or kind of our default setting. We have a default setting. Our children have a default setting. Temperaments are things like when you encounter a new place or a new person, are you eager to meet them? Are you excited to meet them? Or are you cautious? Do you withdraw? Do you hang back? It's also sensory sensitivity. So if a child, anyone had a child that has sensitivity with tags or socks? Yeah, everyone is different on their sensory sensitivity. So it could be auditory, movies are too loud. The crunching of cereal is too much. So we have a range. It could also be your go-to mood. Are you pleasant as a default, or do you tend to be a little grumpy as a default? These are temperaments, and there are between 5 and 9 of them in the research. So the research really varies on what our default settings are. You will leave tonight in your packet with a kind of scorecard of temperaments. So you have a homework assignment, which is to take these and understand what's my temperament and what's my child's temperament. They can be a real source of conflict in family life, yet every single temperament is rigged for a child's survival and thrival, if that's a word. I'll make that up. So, what if we learned and figured out what their temperaments are and viewed them as an asset? How can they be an asset? I'm going to tell you about Annette. Annette is a magnetic personality. She lights up the room, outgoing. When she goes into a grocery store with her son and she walks up to the cashier, she says, "You have such a warm, sweet smile." She connects with everybody she's around. She's very outgoing, kind, wise person. She's a contributor to my blog. She's also a dear friend. Her son, however, when she would say, "Brady, smile, say hello to the cashier," he would hide. And she'd say, "Come on, be polite, come on." And he would start crying. So this kept happening. Brady would get in the car after school and she'd say, "Who'd you talk to or play with at recess? Who'd you sit next to at lunch?" And Brady would refuse to answer. He didn't want to talk about it. And sometimes they'd argue about it, or he'd get upset and throw a tantrum. So one day, a big aha happened. Annette took Brady to a playgroup. At a playground, there were parents and kids, and one of the parents decided to encourage the kids to climb on a big fence, like a wall, a stone wall. And it was actually dangerous, but the parent was goading them on, and Brady refused to go up. And Annette apologized to that parent. "I'm so sorry. He's not feeling well today. I don't know what's going on with him." She left later and said, "What am I teaching my son? He made a responsible decision, and here I apologized for him to save social graces." What was more important? Teaching him that he's a good, responsible decision maker, or saving social grace and promoting a risky, dangerous behavior? So Annette started reading about introversion. She started learning about shyness in young children, and she started letting Brady lead the way. She started watching him more and pushing him less. And all of a sudden, the tantrums stopped. And she really noticed that Brady was cautious. And maybe in the teenage years, this would become a great asset. Like, right? He's cautious. Good. That's a good thing. But it really was a big aha for her. So temperament can be a source of conflict in a family if we don't examine it. Now, I did a workshop 2 weeks ago, and a dad came up to me. We talked about temperament. We did our little scorecard, like, what's your temperament? And he said the next day, in his morning routine, his daughter her focus was all over the place. He was getting so annoyed. Come on, we got to get on our shoes. We got to get on our shoes. And he stopped and he said, "Oh my goodness, she's me. That's how I am. My focus is everywhere but where it needs to be. And I'm consistently annoyed with her because I really don't like that about myself." So it's not only about that temperaments are different and we get annoyed, it can also mean temperaments are the same and we get annoyed. But how can we understand that default setting? Because what happens if we scold a child for their default setting? They might say to themselves, "What's wrong with me?" And maybe you had this experience. Maybe you were scolded in your own childhood for your default setting, and you felt misunderstood. So take a look at that. Be sure that you do that as homework. You find out what your default settings are, what your partner's default settings are, and what your children's default settings are. And think about how they are a source of conflict and maybe how you could view them differently as an asset. If you viewed them as an asset, then how might you respond to them differently? How many of you are either raising a baby right now or care for a baby? A few. Yes. Okay. Well, we're moving on to ages and stages. We're going to talk about babies. I looked today. I went to Barnes & Noble in Evanston and looked, and a whole half of a bookshelf is dedicated to the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. How many read that book? Yep. It's kind of the sacred text for new parents, right? So I, too, read it as the sacred text for a new parent. And I went back to it when I wrote Confident Parents, Confident Kids. And I carefully looked for the feelings and emotions of the new parent. What do we do with that? I looked, and I looked, and I looked, and I found an itty-bitty paragraph in a little box on postpartum depression. That was it. Yet, what does a new parent deal with every single day? I would argue the emotional management of day-to-day life occupies every day. It's not the seat for the living room, the bungo seat and the pumpkin seat and the swing that save us. It's our emotional management of day-to-day life that saves us or gets us through that really intense marathon that is raising a baby. Now, there is hard science to show that there is one top thing that contributes to babies' cognitive, social, and emotional and physical development. One thing. It seems embarrassingly obvious, but that's love, right? But our ability to give a baby love when they cry every day, and babies cry every day, 2 to 3 hours a day, is really challenging, right? It's incredibly challenging. So first of all, the mantra for parents or grandparents who are caring for babies is, you are not failing if your baby cries. You are not failing if you can't soothe your baby. It's really tough. Yes, it's really tough. I see. It's really tough. Yes, you remember. Yes. Yeah. So we need coping strategies as a new parents who are running this marathon. So here's a few tips for these baby caregivers. Get out with baby every day. Every day. See other people, get fresh air, walk in the stroller, although it's bitter right now. Maybe you can find an indoor walking track. But get out every single day for your own mental well-being. See and connect with other parents. Absolutely critical. In fact, there was a study done that compared moms who got out with other moms and moms who did not get out with other moms. And in fact, the toddler, they looked at babies through toddlerdom. Toddlers' cognitive development was more sophisticated with the moms who had a support network. It is just that important that you are supported. You believe that? It's so true. So library story time, music classes, there are moms clubs, and our moms club it's called Moms Club, but it's moms and dads. So there are plenty of opportunities to get out. And then mindfulness needs to be a part of the routine. So if baby is crying, yes, we need to be responsive to a baby's needs, but do we need to be immediately responsive if our emotional barometer is up here? If we are heated, then it is better for us to take care of ourselves. So I talk to parents about stopping, dropping, and rolling your eyes back, literally. Put baby in a safe place, baby will be fine. Baby's crying, but if baby's secure in a safe place, it is better for you to take care of yourself. Stop, drop, close your eyes, breathe until you can get to a better place, a calmer place. Research studies, multiple research studies around the world have shown calmer moms have babies who cry less. Well, how do you get to that calm if you got baby on you all the time? We're human. We require our physical space. So also, the art of withdrawal is helpful. So if you've heard about servant leadership, I think about intentional or purpose-driven parenting as servant leadership. And Robert Greenleaf, who wrote about servant leadership, said you have to learn the art of withdrawal. When do you need to pull away, renew your resources, because you can't give what you don't have? So it is really a gift to baby when we are mindful. Let's move on to young children. Young children, when they have big feelings, can feel like there's a cacophony of noise in their heads. They don't understand all the body sensations that come along with feelings, nor do they have the language to talk about big feelings. I often refer to young children as participating in the young child's opera. There's high drama, there's big highs, low lows, right? And it happens really fast. Lots of big, big emotions that can go away just as quickly, right? If you distract and move on. I want to tell you a story about one of my very first clients. Her name was Maria. She came to me with a bit of a panic about her preschooler. She said, Jennifer, the teacher called me and said that my child, Emma, cannot settle down in preschool. She throws a tantrum, she cries, other kids cry too, but she cannot get back to the learning environment and it's disrupting the other kids. And the teacher said she wants me to do something about it, and she's getting like, the teacher said she wants me to do something about it and I don't know what to do. And now, kids are getting suspended and expelled from preschool. Have you heard this? There's new research being done on the insanity of that. So she was genuinely concerned. What if my daughter gets kicked out of preschool? How do I deal with that? So I said, okay, let's try an experiment. Let's see if you can help her build a feelings vocabulary. So she took home a poster of the faces, feelings faces, and every time they walked past it, they said, how you feeling today? And then when she saw a furrowed brow, she'd say, you look worried. I can see the furrowed brow, is that right? She didn't assume, but she asked, and she labeled, you look frustrated. Is that right? And then she made the connection to her body. Your face is getting red. Are you getting frustrated? Are you angry? Made the body connection. And then they practiced at dinner with the whole family. Let's see what Dad's feeling when we ask him, how was your day, Dad? Let's guess what he was feeling. They did these simple interventions. What I named 4 interventions? Simple interventions. 2 weeks later, unprompted, teacher calls Maria at night and says, I don't know what you've done with Emma, but things have really turned around. She still gets upset, but now when she gets upset, she can tell me what's going on, and she moves back into the learning environment. We're fine. It's not a problem anymore. Well, Maria was kind of in disbelief, but she told the teacher what she did, and it really is proof that name it to tame it works. If children can label their emotions, if they can seek support, if they feel understood in those big moments where feelings overwhelm them, then they really can self-soothe. It is just that powerful. I encourage those who work with young children to take the time when you're in the play environment and everybody's calm to practice deep breathing. Now, this is an example of ocean wave breathing, where you imagine a calm day, not a rough day at the ocean, where your breath mimics the sound and the pattern of the waves going in and out. Ocean wave breathing. I also like, for these cold days, hot chocolate breathing. Does anybody do this? Where you smell the hot cocoa, the warm aroma, and then you blow on it. Another one is to, at bedtime, place a teddy bear on your tummies and give it a ride. Make it go up and down. That practicing proactively of deep breathing prepares you for those moments of big feeling, because then you can issue a gentle reminder. Would taking a few deep breaths help? Or just simply doing it together? I will say my son is 12, and he will have anxiety, and he calls it his serious moments where his heart races, and he describes it as there's loud noises in his head. And so whenever he tells me this, it doesn't matter if we're late for school. We take time out. We sit down on the ground next to one another, and he puts his hand on my heart, and I put my hand on his heart, and we sit there and we breathe. And my heart beat acts as a regulator as he feels it. Mark Brackett talked about emotional contagion, I'm certain. You can use it for the positive by transferring your calming energy to your child when they're having their serious moments. It really works. So let's talk about 8 to 12-year-olds. I just mentioned I have a 12-year-old. This is the magical middle childhood. How many have an 8 to 12-year-old at home? All right. Great. This is a really exciting time. You can get into amazingly deep conversations because they understand more about the world than they ever have. I chaperone my son's recess, and the social scientist in me is always taking mental note of what they're doing. And I watched the boys. They were arguing over what to play, and they decided on ball tag. So I thought they would run off and play ball tag, but they didn't. I watched them get in this highly organized circle. They sat down. They sang this chant, Tarzan, jungle man, swinging from a rubber band. Pop goes the rubber band. What color was the blood? And then they went B-L-U-E, and the E was the tagger. Now, why am I telling you this? How does this have any relevance? Well, what's interesting about this is I said to my son, did a teacher teach you this? No. One of his peers brought it in, taught the rest, and ever since it was the way that they made decisions on the playground. Now, what does this say about their development? What it says is that they are beginning to create their own rules. Rules to games, rules for life. They are beginning to define their identity not because of what you tell them they are, but what they feel they are and how they compare with others. So they have this whole new social awareness that they did not have before, and we sense it. We kind of feel like, okay, we can trust them not to burn the house down. They've got a sense of safety now. They're trustworthy. They kind of have internalized the rules. So this is really a magical time. But they also, because we have this sense of they're trustworthy and competent, we also have much higher expectations. And we place much greater burdens on our 8 to 12-year-olds. So they feel a lot greater social and academic pressures than ever before. So the mantra for us parents of 8 to 12-year-olds is, how can we teach healthy coping strategies for those many social and academic pressures that they feel? So I think a source for inspiration can come from one of the most inspirational authors of the 20th century, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. He studied neurology and psychiatry, and in his 20s, he developed a program for severely depressed high school students that eliminated suicide among that group. And then you likely know that in 1942, at the age of 37, he, his brother, his wife, and his parents were taken to concentration camps, 4 different concentration camps. They were tortured. His parents and his wife were killed. Yet, because of his teachings, he was able to save countless lives. So what can we learn from him? What did he teach, and how is it relevant to our raising 8 to 12-year-olds? He encouraged people to make meaning of their suffering. He encouraged people to think about their ancestors, living or dead, who they knew would only be proud of them if they were their best selves. Your 8 to 12-year-olds are now able to imagine their best self and begin to align their actions with that best self. Later research would coin the term ancestor effect, that if we learn about our history and our ancestry and the struggles that we went through, or they went through, that we have greater gratitude for our lives and also more persistence when the times get tough. So I think there's a lot we can learn about how we can prepare our 8 to 12-year-olds with healthy coping strategies as they deal with social and academic pressures. Well, let's move on into the teen years. But first, I want you to think for a moment, what were the mashup of feelings that you felt when you were a new parent? What did you feel? Here's my list, my brainstorm of what I felt when I was a new parent. Maybe you can relate to this list. I was overwhelmed, daunted, amazed, thrilled, excited, in love, terrified. Does this list make sense to you? Yeah? Yeah. So it's likely that the last time we had a major brain reconstruction was when we became new parents. So go ahead and replace the title of this new parents feelings with teen feelings. And you will empathize with the feelings of our teens who are also going through a body and a major brain reconstruction. They feel vulnerable and also thrilled. And they can see the butterfly, but they're not there yet. They're standing at the gateway to adulthood, and it does look thrilling, it does look exciting, but it's also daunting and overwhelming. I want to tell you a story about another client. We'll call her Nina. Nina came to me and said, my 15-year-old daughter and I are arguing all the time, and I don't know what to do about it. So I asked her some questions. So she told me about her daughter. Her daughter, Grace, was the top of the top performers. She went to the most rigorous high school in Central Ohio, and she was a top performer among those performers. She was a state swim champion. She also received awards in robotics. This was a top performer. And all of a sudden, Nina was hearing from teachers that she was slipping in her academics, and they were fighting all the time. So I said to Nina, do you ever have conversations with your daughter, Grace, that do not involve either logistics, getting from here to there, or performance? Either academic performance, robotics, swim team, performance-related, high-pressure goals. She had to think about it, but once she thought about it, she said, actually, no. That's pretty much what we talk about. So I gave her an assignment, a really simple assignment. I said, okay, take your daughter to her favorite coffee house, buy her dessert, buy her coffee. Do not use all your self-management skills. Do not talk about academics, swim team, robotics, any high-pressure topics. You're there for fun and connection only. And she agreed. She said, I can do that. So they went out for dessert. The next time I went with Nina, she told me what happened. We had a lovely time. For the first time, we were laughing. In quite a while, we were laughing and enjoying one another's company. At the end of the conversation, Grace told me that she cries every night. Grace told me that she's scared of herself at night because she doesn't trust herself to not take her own life. So, Mom immediately got a psychiatrist. The family met with a psychiatrist. Grace met with a psychiatrist. And things gradually began to get better for Grace. She could see that she wasn't trapped, and she had felt alone and trapped. Whew. So what does that tell us? Maybe that our goals for our child can get in the way of true connection. That our desire for their success can actually whittle away at our trust. If we hang on particulars like, you got to get a good grade, you've got to do well in this class because it'll lead to this, because it'll lead to that, because you got to get into a top college. Well, what if she never makes it to college? Our teens are trying desperately to fit in with their peers and with this bigger youth culture. And interestingly, as their social awareness increases, in other words, they work on reading other people's perspective and gaining empathy. As they work on that, and they're going to make mistakes with that, so too does their social anxiety increase. They go together. And that's normal, unless it's debilitating and taking them away from their regular life, which is when you start to seek help, like Nina did for Grace. But that social awareness is going to increase along with their social anxiety. So when, let's go here. When they are upset, they're hurt, they're frustrated, they feel rejected, they may be saying all kinds of wild things because there's not that great connection to their logical brain yet. We know that doesn't come online fully until their mid to late 20s, right? So they may be saying wild things that don't make logical sense to you, but they're really upset. So how can you focus on feelings? Taking care of the feelings, not fixing. We talked about this at the reception, not fixing, but how can you focus on their feelings so that they feel heard and understood and seen? So that they trust that they can come to you with anything. Now, when they calm down, then you can talk to them about reframing. Oh, she was mean to you in the hallway. She's probably hurting. Do you know what's going on with her in her life that might cause her to lash out? So the reframing can happen later, when they're calmer, after you've taken care of their big feelings, because their big feelings are real and they're reasonable in that moment. Consider that our teens know they're going to have to leave your household. And they know that their safety net are their peers. They're their friends. They got to have a tribe. Because when they let loose of you, they're going to need a tribe to be with. So it is their very survival. So the mantra for teen parents, how many of you are raising teens at the moment? A lot. Mantra for teen parents is, it's not personal, it's adolescent development. The dissonance is tough for parents and for teens. They push you away, they need their independence. And then they pull you back because they know they need you. And it is that conflict. They've got an internal conflict, and you feel it externally, right? So repeat to yourself, it's not personal. It's adolescent development. It is the hard path of being at the gateway of adulthood and seeing the possibilities, but also fearing the possibilities. Also, a pitfall, one thing to watch, which we talked a bit about, is our narrow path to success, which as our children near leaving our household can become even narrower. You've got to pass AP English because that'll lead you to the next step, which will lead you to the next step, which will lead to a good college, a good paying job, and we think we know. When our teens want to see the possibilities, and in fact are at a highly creative time because their rational brain hasn't prohibited them from or inhibited their thoughts. So they are really open to thinking about, how can I change the world? So how can we allow them to think big and not define their success path for them? This is a picture of a younger child, but I will say for every age and stage, our children need to hear the words, I love you, no matter what, every day, especially on hard days. They need our physical connection every day. Our teens do too. Even when they're pushing us away, they still need it. So how can we, even if we're not feeling it, how can we make sure that they're getting the trusting, caring, loving connections that they need? All right, I have a question for you that may seem non sequitur, but it's not. How many of you have smoke alarms or a fire exit plan in your household? Yeah, good. That's excellent, because 1 in 4 households will actually need to call the fire department. You could actually have a house fire that needs to be put out. How many households have emotional fires? Every single one. How many have put a plan in place for those emotional fires? Anybody? Has anybody done it? Oh, you have? I'd like to talk to you later. You will leave today with what I call the emotional safety plan. And it is a 1-page, really simple set of questions. What will you say when you feel the heat arising? When you're feeling incensed, when an emotional fire is taking you over, what will you say? I say, Mommy needs 5 minutes. What will you do? I go to my favorite chair. Where will you go? With young children, you can't leave the room because they'll cry more. So you might have to make a plan where you sit in the room, but you go inside and take care of yourself. Now, because you all know social and emotional learning so well, you know about this, but it bears repeating because it takes place time and again in parenting. When we have an emotional fire, whether we're taken over with worry or anger or hurt, a chemical washes over the majority of our brain, taking over our language, our logic, our creativity, and isolates that little amygdala so that we're in fight, flight, or freeze zone. So you know this, right? So if your plan is, I'm going to teach my child a lesson, and they're in tantrum mode, are they going to learn anything? No. Now, what happens if you say, I'm going to react amazingly when I have an emotional fire myself, when I've been hijacked? How's that going to go? But if you have a plan, if you know what you're going to do, I'm going to say this, and it better be brief and short, and you better tell your family and have practiced it so they all know. And you go sit down. Maybe you won't yell. Maybe you won't react in ways where at the end of the night you say, really shouldn't have done that. I wish I could have reacted better. If you have a plan and you let your family know, then your family becomes your accountability and you work your plan and you get better and better at it so that yelling never has to happen. My son is in basketball, and he came from basketball practice the other night and said, "Thank you, Mom, for not yelling." Because the coach of the evening, the parent volunteer, screamed at the kids. But you don't have to do that if you have a plan for your own emotional fires. One of my mentors calls it strange calm. She gets really slow, and it actually freaks her kids out. Mom, what are you doing? But think about that. You get a twofer, right? You're managing yourself. You're using self-awareness and self-management skills, and you're teaching it in that moment. What a powerful teaching moment to take care of yourself. And what if your child mimicked that back to you? Didn't say anything, but just crisscross applesauce, plopped down, and took care of themselves. I mean, crazy self-management skills, right? It's powerful. Also, all families fight, right? It is not a weakness that we argue. It is the fact that we live together and see one another every day and fight for the bathroom, right? So how can we agree to fight fairly? Research says that there are certain ways of fighting that will whittle away at our trust and contribute to unhealthy patterns in relationship. Things like criticizing, like blaming, like contempt, sarcasm, like saying things like, "Oh, you always," or "you never." Can't be true, right? It can't be true. But so how can we agree to not do those things? How can we agree to do things that actually bring us together when we argue? Like focusing on feelings. All feelings are acceptable. Actions based on feelings may not be, but all feelings are acceptable. How can we own our part of the problem? How can we brainstorm solutions together? How can we try out small experiments to see if our solutions might work? And then how can we end with love so that we show that we love each other no matter what? No matter what. And children need to hear on particularly bad days that they are loved no matter what. Because especially with our young children, they don't distinguish between behavior and love. So if you're upset with them, they start saying, "What's wrong with me?" How many of you have said at some point or another, "Oh, that sounded like my mother or father, and it wasn't a good thing"? How many have done that? Yeah, right? Ah! So the assets that you were raised with, maybe your parents were committed to civic engagement and they were wonderful volunteers in the community. That is an asset that you give your children automatically. It is a part of you. Check it off the list. You've got it, right? So think about the assets that your parents gave you. Maybe they really valued kindness. What did they value? But there were also challenges that you got from your parents. And those are a part of you too. So how are you looking at breaking patterns? When it happens that you say, "Ah, that sounds like my mother," and I didn't want it to sound like my mother. How can you step back and reflect and say, what's my true value here? What do I want to be teaching my child instead of what that message was from my own parenting? And then how can I make a new choice? Most of us were raised on this seesaw of authoritarian to permissive. So in other words, you're punished or you're scolded. You should be shameful about your actions. "I'm so disappointed in you." Or laissez-faire, just ignoring your actions, whatever. A lot of us got both. Some of us got extremes on one end or the other. Neither end teaches social and emotional skills. Neither end. So what does? Well, we look at our values, we look at our hopes and dreams, and we say, how can we promote those skills, those social and emotional skills through our intentions and actions? We pause, we calm down when we need to, but then if harm is caused, how can we follow through with our child or our teen to repair harm? Not only of objects broken, but of relationships. So if we ground our child every time they misbehave, they miss curfew, they're way over on screen time, they failed a paper, they lied to us, and so we ground. Then our children say, the logic here is we want to cause them pain. You do bad, you get a painful consequence. But we want to teach them responsible decision making. We actually want to help make those neural connections to logic, right? So every situation is different. And if we are truly being emotionally intelligent, then we take that situation and we say, "Oh, you broke the neighbor when you were having the pillow fight at the slumber party. You girls threw the pillow and broke a priceless heirloom from their family." Now, yes, there's a vase broken, but also there's a relationship there that has been harmed. So how can we think about this? How do we go talk to the neighbor and see how we can fix the vase, but also fix the relationship? Maybe we need to apologize. Maybe we need to write a letter. But our teens are not going to do that on their own. That takes a lot of courage, and it's hard for adults to do that. So they don't need us to fix it for them, but we need to be by their side, coaching them and guiding them and following through on what you might call restorative practice. How do you repair harm when you damage it? That is teaching social and emotional competence. It takes a lot of self-management to go up to a neighbor and knock on the door and say, I'm really sorry that I broke your vase. What can I do to help? But I think that's where the rubber meets the road as far as us helping them develop those responsible decision-making skills. Parents who work to manage their own stress are more empathetic and patient with their children's social and emotional learning. It is true that children raise parents just as much as parents raise children, if we take advantage of those opportunities. In our incredibly busy lives, and every single parent is crazy busy, I feel we have a responsibility to mindfulness in order to be the parents that we hope to be for our children. I use my morning coffee every day when I smell it. It is a reminder to me to take deep breaths before I begin my day, because I know I will be more patient as a coach and consultant and researcher, and also as a mom. So how can you be more mindful and incorporate mindfulness practices into your day? We, you, me, our children, are born confident, ready. We just need to attune the love that we feel with our deepest values and intentional mindful actions to help promote the confidence and competence in ourselves and in our children. I want to leave you with with your own infusion of mindfulness, a quick loving kindness meditation. So I do this every night with my son before bedtime. This is my habit every night. So you're getting a part of our bedtime routine. So I want you to repeat after me. May I be healthy. May I feel safe. May I be happy. May I be kind to myself and others. May I live with ease. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.